Thanks for coming back in, guys. So I'm just going to kick it off. I'll ask a couple of questions and put it out to you guys. So I'm going to go back to Steve on this one and just touch upon kind of the last couple of slides there and some of those personal moments. Kind of, how were you feeling at the time? How did you get past some of those massive hurdles that were going on at the time?
Oh, look, I think there was some time there where I didn't know if we'd be able to get through it. You know, there were some really difficult times around, particularly the really personal stuff around, you know, the employee that became a bit of a psycho, and particularly the senior leader that passed away tragically. So, you know, I looked at it from I've got a lot of responsibility for the entire business. So if I crumble and if things don't work for me, then the whole business will, you know, I've got 100 people that work for us at that stage. So I sort of thought around, well, how do I stay strong? How do I demonstrate courage? And the way that sort of pulled me through was refining back our vision. So that vision that I put up before was around what does our success look like in 2020, which sort of was the guiding light to say, hey, you know what, we're in this terrible spot now. This is what success will look like in the future, and this will sort of drive us through. So that's really what got me through that strong and compelling vision.
Yeah. And did you ever have like a sounding board, so people that you could go to ask for advice, I'm sure?
Oh, look, I think a couple of things for me. So look, I mean, whilst I'm sort of the solo person that runs the business, you know, my wife and I would speak about that every night during that time. And I'd regularly bring all my problems and challenges home and tell her about all the mistakes that I'd made in business. So that was a huge component of getting me through. And second of all, having other business owners, mentors, people that I could use as a sounding board. So whilst they might not have gone through exactly the same thing before, people that could provide a third-party perspective to it, a bit of a helicopter view, whilst I was sort of knee-deep in it.
Yeah. And yourself, is that the case for you, Rory, as well? Maybe a bit of a sounding board for business decisions?
Yeah, particularly in the later years of my journey. You know, the most successful years of my journey is when I had sounding boards for the company, and I engaged people to give me good advice, or at least surrounded myself with people who were going through similar challenges, and I could learn from the challenges that they were going through. I think that's certainly the case. I mean, I've never had a mentor as such. I've certainly done a little bit of reading. I'm not super well read, but I certainly like to speak to business owners, find out about their journey, and I don't know, just be around peers that are going through the same things and use them as smarts to sort of say, okay, I think I can learn from this, I can learn from that. I've never done it in a formalised way, but I certainly my best years have been, the growth of my business has really, really taken off when I've put myself into an environment where I'm dealing with peers that are going through the same sort of thing, and I'm kind of starting to learn from some people who've been through similar challenges.
So on the flip side for both of you then, how important is investing in other people? So you touched a little bit upon that yourselves. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on that for me?
Oh, look, I think very early on, we couldn't afford anyone like the best people. I joke and say that, you know, we hired someone with a CV and a pulse for a few years, which is just someone to go and say, answer the phone, do this, do that. I think as the business has gotten bigger, I've recognized more value in getting the best quality people that we have. You know, we're a people business. Our product is our people and the training and services we provide. So we have to make sure that we get the best quality people. So for us, it's about holding high standards, so making it difficult for people to come into the business. You know, interviews with 3+ people, multiple interviews, psychometric profiles, making sure that we have the best possible people. But I've still made plenty of mistakes. So it's about, well, if I wouldn't enthusiastically rehire them, let's cut the ties early and have high standards.
Yeah. So is that maybe a little bit different for you, would you say then, Rory?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, look, that's the reality of it. Neither right and wrong. Steve's is probably right. But I've followed on instincts. I've hired young generally. I've hired people with the right motivations to want to work in my organisation. I look at people and I say, okay, why are you right? Maybe it's a customer service role that isn't necessarily that appealing to everybody, but you've come from retail and working in this environment, it's going to be a place where there's going to be added value for you because you can work 9 to 5. It might be somebody who, the best employee that I've taken on, who is my 2IC in the organisation at the moment, starting off as a marketing intern at another organisation. I saw she had great talent, great enthusiasm, had done well in a university, and I took her on really young, spent a year developing her and invested in her, but at that time in the business, that was the reality of it. We didn't have the money to spend on A-graders, but she soon turned her into an A-grader, and she really bought into what we do and is a good person. I think fundamentally the most important thing about hiring somebody, if I had to say, the one most important characteristic of hiring somebody is them being a good person, as cheesy as it might sound. You want somebody who can call on a Saturday at 4 o'clock and they care, they can be bothered. It's not like my hours are done. It's like they really care. Naturally, intelligence, street smarts for me is really important, but I like to hire good people who I can trust, people who believe in the business, but will do the right thing, you know? For me, that's important. And as we've grown bigger, we've certainly started to invest into, you know, what you call A-graders and more established, experienced staff. We have to do that to go to that next level. I understand that. But yeah, look, for me, it's identifying the characteristics that will make somebody really want to do the right thing by you and have the intelligence to be able to execute it, I would say is really important.
Yeah, cool. And that's obviously people buying into the vision and your values. Do you lay that out in front of them straight away, or do you like to siphon that out of them and see what they present themselves with?
So, I mean, every job ad that we would have would talk about what the core values are for the business. They're also on the website. They're on every email signature. And so the first question is, tell me a bit about yourself. The second question is, what are our core values? Sometimes I get cover letters that would be addressed to us that would say, you know, your core values are the same as mine. You know, I have a passion for safety because I've been the CFA for 20 years. Or I think providing memorable training is really important. So I like to start that right at the start. Once we get past the first interview, when it was a hire that I used to do, I used to send them a copy of our vision. And then when I'd meet up with them next, I'd say, well, what did you think? And if someone went, oh, that's really tough, or that seems like a lot of work, they probably weren't the right person. But someone who goes, wow, I see the opportunity, I see the excitement, that's the type of person that we want to hire.
Cool. Is that the case for you, would you say?
I haven't done it in a more formalised way, but certainly in a conversational way. I like to talk to people, so I'll go down and get a coffee, have a conversation, really sort of challenge them, try and really subtly understand what they're about, what their motivations are, speak to them like a person. My workplace, and this is what works for me, and it's just not necessarily the right thing to do. But I believe in an open plan office. I don't believe in cubicles or offices where you can't talk. It's open plan. I share all of my ideas with my team. I really try and empower people to sort of give their opinion, and I listen to them. It's not doing lip service. I actually say, okay, what do you guys think of this? I find people are invested in the business now. I'd be a real person. I do the vacuuming in the office. I'll take the bins out. It doesn't matter. I don't care what job it is. I'll do the worst job and the best job or whatever it is. I just appeal to people as a person. The only difference between me and you is I run the business. That's fine, but there's no levels in terms of I'm more special. It's just treating people like people because they're not a commodity. They're a human being. They want to be appreciated and respected. And I find when you do that with somebody in an organisation, you get the best out of them. And that's what's always worked for me. And I have a really, really good run with staff over the years. I have many staff that haven't left for 7, 8 years and are still doing amazing jobs and just getting better and better. And had very, very few people in the 12, 14 years of running businesses who have left who I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answer, guys. I'm going to put it out to you guys out there. So if anybody has a question, yes, gentlemen, straight away in the middle.
Guys and the goal one pager. How you bringing, particularly in the early days, how you're bringing your organisation and take on a journey, and how transparent you were with respect to those profits and margins, etc.
Oh, look, I think it's a really interesting question. I get asked that question a lot. So no one ever, so from very early days, so if you ask, you know, Linda, who's the CFO of the business, who's done 9.5 years, so she's been there almost, I think she was the 4th employee, and I was number 1, and she's still there today. I've always been very open about the goals for the business, because I think that if we don't clearly articulate the goals and strategy for the business forward, they can't see how they can help towards it. So I remember at the time we probably had 12 staff, and I invited the 8 that were in Victoria and said, we're going away for the day and we're going to sit down in the room and we're going to flesh out our success for this year and what our strategy is. So I think being really open on that is important. Around transparency, we don't share all numbers with all staff, only for the reason that profit as a number, if not educated, is not a good thing to share. So I could talk about, you know, there's a business, You know, my business a few years ago, which made $1 million profit. That doesn't mean anything unless you educate people to say, well, I paid the tax office $300,000, I paid debt back of $300,000 to the bank, working capital increased by $300,000. So actually the distributable profit is $100,000. And most people go, well, that's not much. So profit with education is great if people can contribute to it. But if you don't educate people around what profit actually means and all those things that I just talked about, that's where I think there can be challenges around it. So many years ago, we talked to revenue about everyone in the business. If someone asks me what our revenue is, I'll talk about it. If someone asks about our margin, I'll talk about it. But I think the senior leadership team know everything, profit and loss, not everyone in the business, because without the education, I don't think they'll understand it. But I like to invite people in being aligned to the strategy because, you know, I might have an idea, but I want to get everyone else's idea and input into it.
Cool. I mean, we talked about net profit with staff. I think when Steve touched on, it's not appropriate because there's too many variables, too many interpretations. It's not appropriate unless you're going to really sit down to understand what you're going to do with it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to buy a Ferrari with it. I think that I set revenue targets and growth targets that we aspire to. I think that engages the team. And for me, we have like 90% of our team are aged between 20 and 30. So we have a lot of fun when we get wins. You know, we celebrate it. We do a lot of social stuff. We get the guy. We work on Brunswick Street, so we get down to a pub and say, "Listen, we had an awesome week. Let's have some fun, make some bad choices. Let's just really celebrate what's happening and getting everybody involved and feel part of the team." And so the KPIs we set are generally built around revenue, which most people understand. No one's ever asked me about what the net profit is. I mean, there's so many variables about it. They don't know what your wage is that you're taking out of it. So I don't think it's necessarily an issue bringing it up or not bringing it up. But I certainly think that they need to be engaged in the KPIs that you're trying to reach in the business. For me, revenue's a big KPI, and they've just got to work on a presumption. I've got my numbers right to make sure that we'll make profit out of that.
Great question, great answers, guys. Anybody else out there?
Yes, I'd like to ask, how did you guys create a point of difference in your business? How did you go about that?
So I think the first thing is actually, this is a good example that you can involve staff. So there's probably 3 things for me to work through here, which I think all of which can work. The first is to involve the team to say, what do we really do that's unique compared to our competitors? Like, what do you do if we're delivering a training course that's different than when you used to work somewhere else? So the first one is asking the team. The second one is actually asking clients. So the number one thing I would ask anyone who's come on board would be, why did you choose us? And they'd say, well, we chose you because, I remember someone once saying, we chose you because you do training for BHP and we're a supplier to them, so if you're good enough for them, you're good enough for us. I'm like, wow, okay, I need to start looking at those logos and where we're going to put them. I think the third thing is that I defined quite early on that in our industry, I wanted to build, you know, a diverse range of emergency response and safety services and training courses across the country. So as of today, there's no one that has the same geographical footprint and the same number of services, because each year I just keep trying to add more so that we can go to our ideal client, which is a large mine or oil and gas site. So it's the person ultimately responsible for health and safety nationally, and I can go to them and say, this is the solution we offer. So we're going to them around providing a national single source solution to take away sort of their pain and their issues, which means that we've been building that year after year after year after year, and we're still always building it. So I had an end client in mind, which in my mind was, in 5 or 10 years' time, I want to be able to walk into that national mining business and say, I can do this for you nationally, because I knew the value of that contract. I knew that's what I wanted to drive to. So each year was about just chunking up a little bit more, opening another state location, adding some more services, and really defining that differentiator.
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly for every business I've started up, I've looked at the market and tried to identify where the hole is, whether it be a service that they're offering, a price that they're offering, the ability to be able to customize something that nobody else is offering. In terms of point of a difference, I mean, look, I'm of the belief, because I come from a sales and marketing background, that sales cures all. So, you've got to be really good at something and find what you're good at and use that as a point of difference. For me, if I had to say historically, I believe, not in an arrogant way, but I believe that I'm better than most people in marketing and sales. It's coming up with strategies going to generate business for the company, that it's going to be do different stuff than what our competitors are doing, that we're going to be on a cutting edge, and it's something I feel really comfortable with. And so I find businesses where I think if I can apply what I'm good at, then I can make it work. That's, for me personally, that's really important, and I'm of the opinion from a lot of businesses that I've met, and I've heard so many great ideas, that if sales, marketing, business generation isn't a strength of yours, find somebody who can help you with it. Find somebody who can jump in there with it, because you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't sell it, if you can't get it to market, if you can't get appointments, if you've got the wrong strategies, you're running on the spot. That is the most crucial part, in my opinion, of a successful business, is the ability to be able to generate opportunities, generate sales, and bring customers to your site, or engage customers on the phone, or with marketing strategies. If there's one thing you want to do in your business, is work out how to sell the product that you're offering.
Great answer, guys. Anybody else out there? Yes, gentleman in the jacket there.
I just want to thank both of you for both of your shares. They're very direct and getting a real insight on what profit really means. This question's for Rory. You mentioned that there was a point of time in your business where you actually linked up with the US and UK leaders as well. What value did you provide for them to get some really cool insights from both those countries?
Yeah, all right. So, I mean, you look at it in a practical sense. As I'm selling a gift in Australia, I had no real intentions at that point of moving offshore. So you say, okay, I know so much about what I've learned in 8 years running a gift company within Australia. Yeah, there's 300 million people in the US and 60 million people in the UK, and these guys are big players. They're going to know stuff that they've experienced and marketing strategies that they use and internal processes that they've got. We're not competitors. Firstly, why not share information? So I just made a call to them, went over to, say, for the company in the UK, Virginia Hayward, amazing hamper company. They were great, took me out for dinner the first nights, gave me time in their whole operation, went from their marketing, customer service, spent time with everybody. I learned more in 3 or 4 days than I had in the last 4 years of my business, because I got exposed to a company who had completely different ideas on how to acquire businesses, and I was able to pick what I thought all those good ideas were that I could attribute it to my business. And I gave him plenty of stuff too. I gave those guys plenty of stuff, and the same with the guys in the US. And we're not competitors, so why not share the information? You know what I mean? I'm a big believer in looking at opportunities and seeing where you can learn from people in the same industry in different places in the world, where you can share and pool information. Why not? It makes sense, doesn't it? You're not going to be worse off from it. Yeah.
Good question. Gentleman in the white.
I really loved your point about activities that are going to drive the business in the future, and I see that you're in the consulting game now. How do you work with businesses to drive those? What's your one for your new business?
So I think, so good question. So even today, I had 2 meetings today, and I said, one was with a prospective customer, and I said, well, how many activities did you do selling this SaaS product? Like, how many activities outbound did you do last week? And they couldn't tell me. And I said, well, if you don't know it, it's probably a crappy result. So I think it comes back to the example of what are the key outbound activities that we need to do, and how many hours are we dedicating that to a week? I've worked with businesses that have 50 staff, and I say, how many hours last week did we spend seeing prospective clients in a professional services business? And they go, oh, probably 2. I'm like, well, that's the rate of growth in the business then. So what are the specific activities, whether that's driven by inbound leads going to see them, whether that's existing customers? I think any business needs to look at how we're going to grow. Are we growing from existing customers and selling them more, launching new products to existing customers, or finding new customers? Because each of those are different strategy. And a lot of businesses focus on new customers and new products, and they forget about their existing client. So I've worked with businesses like in IT and in software and said, why don't you actually go and see your current customers every quarter to look at what their business needs are, what requirements they have, and how to actually grow it. And all of those businesses have grown their sales, because sometimes they're looking at the shiny object, which is new customers, not at those existing customers. So I think you can measure it hours, you can measure it calls. I work with a business, and one of their strategy for their sales team is every day is 10 before 10. They're going to make 10 cold calls before 10 a.m. every day. And I'm like, I love that. That just means every day the discipline to do it. 5 staff, each week, 250 extra calls. And I just think that's a great way to sort of ingrain that discipline. So I would always rather look at the activities rather than the revenue, because I know if the activities are right, and if I'm any good, or if the leaders are good as a sales coach, and if we've got a good point of difference, the results will come later. So I'm always interested in, recently I did some work with an organisation and said to them, you know, we need to maximise, to 10x the value of the business, we need to increase the number of hours we're spending each week out there with our ideal customer.
Look, I mean, the hardest thing you can do in a business is to get on a phone and try and sell. I think that's, I mean, there's a lot of tough stuff about running a business, but the hardest thing you can do is sell, and a lot of people hide from that. Salespeople hide from that. The amount of salespeople that I've hired that want to try and just deal with inbound inquiries, inbound sales leads, and a good salesperson gets on a phone and does the hardest thing you can do, and that's face the potential rejection. But it makes or break your business. You know what I mean? If you really want to have a successful business, you've got to have the guts and courage to get out there and you know, contact people and get some rejections and get hurt. But in my experience, for all 3 of my businesses, that's what's made or broken us, is actually just having the courage to sell and getting on the phone and putting yourself out there, and not always doing it the easy way of just sending an email. Emails are easy, it's a cop-out. It's actually get on the phone and say, listen, what's happening? What are you doing? What are you guys doing here? And have a conversation with them. You're an expert in your industry. Come up with a compelling offer for them and learn from it. First 10 calls go bad, you'll be better on your 11th. But pick up the phone and do the hard work. Generally, it's like anything, you know, whether you're dieting or do whatever it is, the hardest thing to do is going to get you the best results. And you can hide behind excuses to say, oh, I'll just email them, I don't want to disturb them. You're not going to get the same result as you can pick up the phone call. So it's as simple as that. If you really want it, and it's easier said than done. I've been there and I'm not always good at it. I'm not perfect at it, I don't do it every day. But if you really want it, you're going to have the balls to get on the phone and make the calls and get out there and network and speak to people and put yourself out there. Because your business lives or dies by sales. Doesn't matter how good your product is.
Gentleman, the lady at the front actually, and we'll come back to the gentleman in the white.
Hi, thank you to both. Really enjoyed that. My question is to Steve. With a lot of companies really struggle to move on from a small business, and you went from nothing, and you talk about now your main clients are BHP and the likes. How did you go from that kind of growing this small business, and what were the real changes that you saw in moving from that small to bigger?
I think the biggest difference early on was that in the first couple of years, it was just the amount of effort that I would put in, you know, the amount of calls, the amount of people I'd see. But it comes down to, how do I build a team that do that? So I joke about how could I make myself redundant from every role in the business? So I was the only salesperson up to a $2.5 million business, until I went, you know what, for us to grow to a $10 million business, I've got to replace myself out of the sales team. Then to a point where I go, well, you know what, I need to replace myself as the sales manager. To the point where 2 years ago, I said I want to replace myself as the CEO of the business. So I just think it's about hiring people. Most businesses that I see now are terrible at delegating and empowering to their staff, because they go, no one can do it as good as me. And sometimes they're true, but I say, why don't you hire someone that can do it 80% as good as you, and then you can help them with the 20, and then eventually you'll hire someone who can do it better than you. So I think it's just about getting better at making hiring decisions, getting the best quality of people that we can, and learning to be able to let go and know that there's still people that I would, when I was CEO of my business, that I go, I could do that job better, but I've only got, 60 hours a week-ish to work. I can't work 120 hours, so I need them doing 80%, and 80%'s okay because I'll help them get better. So I see that with a lot of business owners where they just struggle to do it. The other thing is that, like what Rory was saying before, great businesses are built on marketing and sales. So you can have the best product in the world that no one knows about and that no one is going to speak to someone about. And doing a lot of entrepreneurial training, there are so many people that actually hate sales. They're like, they fall in love with their product or their service, but they go, I actually hate selling. And I ask them, well, why did you create your business? Oh, because I'm passionate about this. I had a need for this. I had a personal experience. And I said, well, sales is just you going and speaking to someone, talk to them about that. Say, the reason I started this business was because I was in the fire brigade. I saw this as an opportunity and I thought I could do it better. The reason that you started that medical business was because you had a relative that went through this challenge, go and tell the story. So I think sales doesn't have to be this. Most people's only experience with salespeople is buying a car or buying something in a store, whereas sales is actually a really important profession, and business owners that hate sales, I reckon, can love it if they look at why they do what they do and how to connect prospective clients with it. And learning to love sales and talking to people about what you do and how you can help them, I think that's where it can come from. Because without it, no business will grow.
Cool. Any other questions out there? Yes, gentleman in the white.
Just, I guess, if you're looking back and you had your time again, what would be the biggest learning you had, or one or two things you would have done differently?
It's a good question.
Yeah, like I said before, concentrate on net profit as opposed to revenue. Don't get excited by growing and starting to see a million here and there and doubling it and thinking that's the definition of success. I definitely would look back and say more focus to be put on net profit. For me, delegation into other roles and treating yourself and preparing yourself to be a medium to large size business, or at least going from a small business to a large business, and learning how to properly delegate roles to other people and build a structure of delegation instead of just thinking you can do, like Steve said. It's easy to fall into the trap. You can do everything the best, and you probably can do 80% of the stuff the best, but you only got so many hours a day. So you might be able to do it the best in, the first 50 hours in your week, but if you do it in the 80th hour of your week when you're buggered and you haven't slept and you're tired and it's at 11 o'clock at night, I reckon the fella that's doing it or the girl that's doing it at 10 o'clock's doing a better job. Let's be realistic. So for me, it was those sort of things. I still struggle with that. And one of my challenges at the moment, now that we've got to the point where we've got more staff than ever, and we've delegated all this stuff, and it says, okay, now it's time for me to innovate, come up with all these ideas and bring the business to the next level. Because that's why I'm paying all these wages and looking around the room and just seeing just money at that desk, and it's all on me to free me up to come up with all these great ideas. And that's not always that easy, you know what I mean? You sit there and you say, okay, I've got to be this creative genius who's going to take this business to the next level. It doesn't necessarily come easy. And in the last 12 months, I've really found that challenging, is to really say to yourself, what did I get out of today? What did I come up with? What innovations did I come up with? What did I come up with that's going to give us the edge in the next battle? Because business is war without bullets. I always think of it. I think of what every other competitor I'm coming up against is doing, what they're doing at their desk. If I want to incentivize myself, sometimes I go online and read articles about them and how much they're turning over and what they're doing. I think, I want your business, So I sit there and try and get myself revved up to try and beat them. And you say, okay, what did I do to try and better us to be better than them? And that can be a challenge, I find. So, I'm still working on it.
I think a couple of things. One would be that, growing a business past a couple of people to, the size we are now was all, if you look at the biggest pain points over the last 11 years and the things that I talked about before, most of them were poor people decisions or people that didn't work well. So I would be quicker. And most people that I know call me up they're about to fire someone and they're like, I need some words of encouragement. And I go, well, out of the 30 or 40 or so people that I removed from our business, first of all, most, 95% were the wrong cultural fit. But I still would have done it earlier. So when people say, what's the best advice that I could have? I'm like, you know what, if they're the wrong person, rip the Band-Aid off early and get the best possible person that you can. And I come from very much a people business. So, wrong person can cost us clients, it can cost us so much to do with the business, not even financially, reputation. I think the second thing is you need to know your numbers and cash flow. So you can still be a $10, $20 million business and go through cash flow challenges. It feels the same as a $200,000 business. So know what the drivers of cash are in your business. So recently I had someone coming to a day that I worked with that I did some consulting for, and they're like, oh, I'm worried I'm not going to be able to pay wages next week. And I did a quick analysis and their average debtor days were 160. That meant it took 5.5 months for a client to pay them, which is why they had no money. They didn't have the courage to make the call to collect the debtors. They didn't look at the numbers. So the learning from that is, what's the driver of cash flow in your business? Is it inventory days, or is it something like inventory turns, or is it debtor days? How can you then measure that weekly? So I go into a business, I go, what are your debtor days? Well, I don't know. I'll ask the accountant. I know it's probably going to be bad. So just look at that early and work out what's your driver of cash flow and watch it like a hawk. Because if you watch that each week, you can still do something if there's a change. You look at that monthly or quarterly, it's too late. And businesses can get into really bad troubles as a result. And I've certainly done that many times over my years, and there's nothing more stressful than worrying about whether you can make payroll.
Guys, we're coming to the end now, so I'm just going to put one question out there, and I'll maybe put one last question out to the lady here in the white. So I've already asked Rory this question, but Steve, are you able to find that work-life balance?
Now, absolutely. But now I'm not in the same role that I used to be. I think I have a lot of people that talk to me about, I want to take my business national. So all of our team are national, every state and territory. And I go, well, be prepared for 100 flights a year. Because I averaged 100 flights a year for goodness knows how many years. And have spent my life at airport lounges and hotels and things like that. And a lot of times in remote locations, Perth, Northwest WA, Darwin. So I think, it was really difficult when building the business to do that. I always had good holiday times, but I don't know that it was perfect all the way through. So I think I've gotten better at that in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, once I've got a better quality of team and able to leave the business. But for the first 6 or 7 years, it was terrible. Saying that, my motto was just do whatever it takes, and I have an extremely supportive wife and family. So I would work, I would leave home at 6:30, I'd get home at 6:30, I'd spend time with Kel and the boys, but you know what, it hits 9 o'clock, I'd just work, and I'd be falling asleep at my laptop, 3 nights a week, working till 1 a.m. Just my view was whatever it takes to achieve what I wanted to be able to achieve, and my view was that I would rest later, and now I'm at the point where the business needs me a day a month or less, so I've got the rest now. But I certainly didn't have it when growing. You can't take a business, I don't think, from like $1 to $10 million in 3 years without just working your guts out. Or maybe they are and they're a much better leader than I can, but I certainly couldn't.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Okay, so last question, lady in the white.
I heard tonight that there are issues managing staff, and one is hard, and also labor cost is very high. Looking at what's trending around the world, the business model have changed to more a network platform one where you utilize resources outside your own organization. So thinking outside the box, I know not many people can be Instagram or WhatsApp. Instagram was sold for $1 billion with 13 staff, and WhatsApp was sold for $19 billion with less than 50 staff. But how do we transition to more that business model and thinking outside the box? Maybe hard to get marketing staff, maybe use customers as your advocates.
So I think there's some really interesting thoughts there around what's the business model. So I have a business model at the moment, which in the Fire and Safety Australia business is we sell people's time around training and compliance, paramedics, doctors, emergency response staff. So that is a very people high business. If I was looking at I'm always interested in going, well, what are the different options for employment, as an example? So a lot of people would say to me as a solo entrepreneur, I can't afford a full-time staff member. And I go, well, neither could I. So I had 1 full-time staff member, I had 10 casual staff. Even now, there would be probably another 30 casual staff and part-timers. I have at least, I reckon, 8 now, mums or parents that would work flexi time. I've got 4 people that have been with me in excess of 7 years that have always worked 5 or 6 hour days. So I don't think everyone needs to be a full-time permanent role. I have a lot of business I work with that have a lot more freelancer or people overseas more. It's more of a global marketplace. And the benefit for them is they don't need a huge office and they don't need the commute. So I think it depends on what the business model is. The tech type of development which says, I'm going to build a product that's worth all of this amount of money that generates itself is good, but then the downside is extremely expensive. You can't bootstrap that business. So you've got to go and have such a good idea that's so unique and different, raise all the money, and then there's risks and things with that. But I think you've got to, look for flexibility. Just about every role, except probably the top 7 people in the business, could be a part-time role or a casual role, and not just a permanent full-time role.
Yeah, it's a challenging question. I think a lot of it depends on the sort of business that you're doing to give you a really relevant answer. Certainly outsourcing different roles, administration roles, accounts roles, looking at stuff that doesn't need to be done necessarily within Australia. is a relatively efficient way to cut costs initially. There's certainly some challenges that come with it. That's the reality of it. There really is, and it can be time consuming just managing those people because they don't necessarily have a firm understanding of what you're trying to achieve with your business. But it certainly is an option, and it's a more cost-effective option. Technology can certainly do a lot as well. We really invest in technology and are really passionate about technology to try and, essentially try and minimise staff bills and maximise profit and capitalise on revenue. So it's a balancing act, and you just look at a job and you say, okay, is it worth paying this much within Australia? Is there an outsourced option that we could capitalise on? I mean, as a general rule, I don't know if it's 100% relevant to your question, but I've always been a big believer when choosing outsourced people, whether it be somebody working in SEO or somebody working managing my pay-per-click advertising. Personally, I'd like to find a freelancer who, as opposed to an agency. I don't deal with agencies at all because I think invariably you end up paying for their reception, their big office, and the founder's main objective is to go out there and get more business. Whereas when you kind of maybe find a freelancer who's an expert, let's say in SEO, but not an expert salesperson, and not necessarily going to grow their company into a $10, $100 million company, but they're awesome at what they do, I try and really find those people and invest in them and spend money with them. So I have a little bit of leverage with them because I'm the most important customer and they're working from home, give them good incentives. But it's just sort of drawing out those people who are really good at their job, but just not good at selling. But they've got a level of expertise in industries like pay-per-click advertising, like SEO, that they're probably better than the junior burger I'm going to get at the agency that's just been passed on my work and changing his job every 3 or 4 months. And I used to deal with agencies, and I certainly learned that finding freelancers who are passionate about their space but aren't good salespeople are a great investment. So hopefully that helps with your question a little bit.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. Can you join me in a round of applause for our guest speakers this evening?